welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into some genuinely fascinating source material that explores the 10 signs of spiritual awakening. If you've ever stopped and wondered about your own spiritual growth, or maybe felt like something is shifting inside you, well, we're going to explore that together today. We'll be taking what often feels like a really mystical, hard-to-grasp topic and structuring it into a clear, easy-to-follow journey. So let's just jump right in. Think about this for a second. Have you ever noticed that things which once seemed completely ordinary to you are suddenly carrying a much deeper meaning? Maybe you're sensing that you're learning lessons right now that you would have completely missed just a few years ago. This is actually the very first hook our source material uses to get us thinking about our own personal assessment. It's that subtle, almost unexplainable feeling that your entire perspective on life is fundamentally shifting. You know, when most people hear a phrase like spiritual eyes opening, they immediately jump straight to Hollywood-style dramatic visions. You picture seeing angels or some intense supernatural light show. I mean, we've all seen the movies, right? But the reality our source points out is actually a lot more practical. It's simply about learning to perceive reality differently. It is a fundamental shift in your perception and your everyday thoughts, not necessarily some explosive cinematic event. To make this super clear, we've categorized the source's 10 signs into 5 distinct spheres. We'll cover 1. Rethinking spiritual sight. 2. Shifting your internal world. 3. Changing how you see others. 4. Deepening your divine connection. And 5. Living with eternal perspective. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, Rethinking Spiritual Sight. So, spiritual growth often flies completely under the radar simply because we're looking for the wrong kind of evidence. Spiritual sight is actually a deep practical change in how you think, how you understand life, respond to challenges, and relate to God. It literally changes how you handle life's realities every single day. Look, if you're responding to a stressful email differently today than you did a year ago, or if you're processing a big disappointment with a new sense of peace, that is your spiritual sight at work. That brings us right into Section 2, Shifting Your Internal World. This deep internal shift highlights the third sign from our source material. Your priorities are fundamentally changing. That constant pursuit of approval, the obsession with status, the exhausting need to constantly impress people, those things really begin losing their grip on you. Instead, you start investing heavily in things with lasting value. Character, truth, integrity, and your relationship with God take the front seat. The temporary, flashy rewards, they just don't do it for you anymore. And this shift leads directly into the fourth sign, becoming hyper-aware of the battle between truth and deception. In the past, you might have just passively accepted destructive thoughts or subtle lies, like you are worthless or your circumstances are hopeless. But now, your spiritual eyes are open. You absolutely do not accept those fearful or negative thoughts as reality anymore. You actively challenge those destructive patterns with truth. You wield discernment. And as the source heavily emphasizes, this becomes a massive source of personal freedom, which naturally flows into the seventh sign. Fear loses its influence. Now, to be absolutely clear here, the source material doesn't claim that fear disappears completely. Obviously, you still face challenges. You still encounter uncertainty. But the huge difference is, you don't need to know exactly what will happen because you trust the one who does. Your growing trust allows you to actually move forward despite the fear. And that is a profound indicator of an internal world that has been radically transformed. Let's move on to Section 3, Changing How You See Others. Once your internal world changes, it inevitably leaks out into how you view everything else. This brings us to the very first sign mentioned in the original text. You begin to see beyond appearances. Look, most people evaluate life based purely on visible, surface-level circumstances. If things look good, they're happy. If they look bad, they panic. But spiritual maturity stops you from doing that. You start asking deeper questions. You recognize that things might actually be working out for your good beneath the surface, even when you can't see the immediate evidence of it. Because you're looking deeper, you arrive at the fifth sign, a profound development of compassion. You start realizing that everyone around you carries hidden struggles and invisible wounds. As a direct result, you become much slower to judge, way quicker to understand, and far more willing to forgive. The source material makes a really beautiful point here. The more clearly you see the mercy that you've been given, the more naturally you extend that exact same mercy and grace to others. Next up is Section 4, Deepening Your Divine Connection. We've looked inward, we've looked outward, and now we're looking upward. So how do your everyday spiritual practices actually change? Maybe in the past, prayer felt like a chore. Reading scripture felt like checking a box on a to-do list. Worship felt like just an ordinary routine. But as your spiritual awareness grows, there is a vibrant new sensitivity. You aren't just performing a duty anymore. You experience a growing, beautiful awareness of presence, guidance, and peace in totally ordinary, everyday moments. And speaking of those spiritual practices, this brings us to the sixth sign. Text that used to feel incredibly static suddenly feels alive. The words on the page haven't changed one bit, but your understanding absolutely has. Familiar passages suddenly reveal new depth and seem to speak directly to your current situation. Stories you used to just skim over suddenly become profound life lessons, all because your newly opened spiritual eyes are unlocking connections you previously missed. This sight also gives you an entirely new lens for viewing your own history, which leads to the eighth sign, starting to recognize a higher hand in your life. Think about it. Years ago, you might have felt completely lost or alone. Even months ago, you were maybe in a season that made absolutely zero sense. But today, with hindsight, you recognize clearer patterns of protection and preparation. Life starts feeling a whole lot less random, and the unseen faithfulness woven throughout your personal story becomes absolutely undeniable. This shift leads to one of the most important signs of all, hands down. You desire God Himself more than just information about God. It is so incredibly easy to get caught up in studying theological mysteries, debating ideas, or consuming endless information. But true spiritual maturity produces a craving for actual intimacy and relationship. You don't just want the facts anymore, you crave the connection. Finally, let's look at Section 5, Living with Eternal Perspective. This is the ultimate indicator that a deeper work is taking place in your life and fundamentally shaping your trajectory. When you start viewing life through the lens of eternity, temporary problems and short-term disappointments simply no longer define your entire future. Material things lose their tight grip on you. A bad week or a failed project doesn't crush you the way it used to because your spiritual sight has zoomed way out. You see the much, much bigger picture now. As your perspective zooms out, you naturally begin asking yourself entirely different questions. Questions like, what truly matters? What lasts forever? What kind of person am I actually becoming? If you find yourself pondering these big picture questions instead of just stressing out about tomorrow's to-do list, it's a massive indicator of a growing, mature spiritual perspective. So a big question is, how do we actually get there? Well, the source reminds us that this isn't usually some overnight miracle. It develops slowly. It happens through prayer, engaging with scripture, everyday obedience, worship, and honestly just navigating life experiences that test and deepen your faith. It's a slow, steady, and beautiful process of relationship building. If we take one core thesis away from this entire source text, it has to be this. We have to understand the end goal. The ultimate purpose of having your spiritual eyes opened isn't so you can become some guru who discovers hidden mysteries or decodes the universe. The ultimate purpose is simply knowing God more deeply. That relationship is the true prize of this entire journey. I want to leave you with this really powerful final thought directly from the source material. It says, the world may look the same, but you will never see it the same way again. As your internal world shifts and your compassion grows, your physical surroundings might not change at all, but you have changed. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. As you go about your day today, look around you and ask yourself, what is my current perspective causing me to miss right in front of me? I'll see you next time.